Okay, I'm calling the regular meeting of May 7th, 2019 to order. The invocation will be given by myself. Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this day. Help us to use good judgment for the business at hand and guide us in wisdom with a continuing sense of truth and fairness for the community we represent. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Kirchner.
Mr. Kirchner has an excused absence.
Mr. Krieger.
Here.
Mr. Landig.
Here.
Mr. Marne.
Here.
Mr. Blake.
Here.
Mr. Donovan.
Here.
Mrs. Dowling.
Here.
Approval of the minutes for work session of April 16th, 2019.
Move to approve. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger.
Yes.
Mr. Landig.
Yes.
Mr. Marne.
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Donovan.
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling.
And the minutes for the regular meeting of April 16th, 2019.
Move to approve. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger.
Yes.
Mr. Landig.
Yes.
Mr. Marne.
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Donovan.
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling.
Abstain.
Thank you. Tonight we have a presentation by Chief Knight. Chief Knight, oh, there he is.
It's over there.
I'm used to him being over there. but- Thank you, Chief Knight.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight and present our annual 2018 Civilian Employee of the Year and Officer of the Year. I'd like to present first our Civilian of the Year, and if I could have Libby Stanton please come forward. Libby joined the police department September 8th of 2015 and works as the administrative assistant to the Detective Bureau. In 2018, Libby had the challenge of learning the new payroll system. The implementation of any new system, there's a period of confusion, but Libby sent emails to everyone, keeping them informed of problems and changes. Libby's focus on learning the details made the transition to the new system almost flawless. In addition to working with the new system, she had to input payroll in the old system as well, effectively having to do 2 payrolls for a large department, about 125 people, each pay period. She never complained about the extra work and even came in on Christmas Eve, a city holiday, to complete the payroll for that week. She's also done an excellent job with handling a large amount of side off-duty jobs that come into the department on a monthly basis. She's developed a system of sending out emails prior to posting jobs, which allows everyone equal opportunity for the job. She often receives emails about last-minute jobs after hours and on weekends and takes care of those on her own time. She always has a cheerful personality and makes the Detective Bureau an enjoyable place to be. She is quick to laugh and keep the atmosphere light while capably doing her work. She's deserving of being named Civilian Employee of the Year. Congratulations.
She has to give a speech, right?
Over. You want her to do that now or when I'm done with the officer?
We need.
For our Officer of the Year of 2018, would Detective Anderson please come forward? Detective Anderson joined the police department on August 1st of 2006. In his 12 and a half years with the department, he has spent the last 5 years as a detective and has proven himself to be a leader in the Bureau. He takes initiative, is a mentor to younger officers, and is always willing to help fellow detectives and those in road patrol. 6 years ago, Detective Anderson started the department's Villa Cruiser event, and this program continues to help many needy families and food pantries in the city of Mentor. And once again, all that food we collect all stays within the city of Mentor. This program has also taken in thousands of dollars in cash donations, which has helped the department's Cops and Kids program provide gifts to the less fortunate children in the city. Detective Anderson has worked on numerous lengthy investigations that have been personally and professionally demanding. No case was more demanding than being assigned as the lead detective in the investigation of the patrolman Zaney death. Steve was relentless in building the best possible case against the defendant. He worked tirelessly with the other detectives. He came in early, stayed late, focused both his and everyone's efforts to make sure the suspect was successfully prosecuted. For his exemplary work on this investigation, Detective Anderson was awarded the Department Excellence Award in 2018. Detective Anderson has earned the respect of his fellow officers and is a great asset to the department and is very deserving as Officer of the Year. Congratulations, Steve. Thank you very much.
Well, now, don't leave that podium yet, Chief. I think we want to let people know that this is going to be Chief Knight's last council meeting. He spent 37 years on the force and done an outstanding job for the city of Mentor, and you will be well missed. I mean, sorry to see you go, and I know that for a fact your wife at one time said, "Don't let him talk you into staying any longer."
Thank you. You know, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve in a position as a chief of police here in the city of Mentor. I can't thank both this council enough and the city administration enough, including Mr. Flipiak, who's not here, for all the support that I've gotten, our department's gotten, plus all of the support the department has gotten from our residents. Enjoyed it. It's time to go, and it's time for the next caretaker to come in, and I hope you give him the same support you all gave me.
Well, now the administration has a few comments they'd like to say, so you're not off the hook yet.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Pedro.
These comments do come from the city manager, and he regrets that he couldn't be here on your last night, Chief, and so I get to talk and read tonight for him, but I agree with and echo every sentiment that's in his comments. So on the last city council meeting you will attend as chief, I wanted to publicly acknowledge your 37-year commitment to our community. I'm sorry I could not have been here to deliver these comments in person. It has been my great honor to work with Chief Knight over the last 10 years, and I can say that he has, without fail, kept the city's best interest at heart in his actions and leadership of our great police department. Over your years of service, you have brought commitment and dedication, a desire to make our city better, a better place to live and work. You've brought compassion, the highest ethical standards, solid leadership, and an example for others to follow in what it means to be a good public servant. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve with you through the years. You are leaving the department in a very good place, and you have prepared it well to meet Mentor's bright future. This community is indebted to you for your service, and we thank you for a job well done, sir. Thank you.
Joy Madison.
Thank you. This is supposed to be about them, not me.
It's about the entire department.
Yes.
And having said that, before we move on, I think Captain Gunch is in the room here since we've got only one council meeting this month, because our council meeting for May 21st was previously canceled. Captain Gunch is going to be our new chief. You mind standing, sir? Congratulations to you. I think we've said enough about the police department tonight. Not really. We got a great department. Everybody has done a fine job, and we enjoy them.
Yeah. It's a canine.
Okay, with moving on, let's see. Next we have public hearings, which we have none. Tabled legislation, none. New legislation, ordinance number 19-0-028.
An ordinance to authorize transfers of funds and revisions to appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Zampedro. Members of council, this ordinance does several things. Firstly, it authorizes the approval of 5 permanent cash transfers, as noted in the staff memo. From the general fund, a little over $1.7 million is being transferred to cover both items in the payroll stabilization fund and the self-insurance fund. It also has 2 permanent cash transfers coming out of special revenue funds. Firstly, the TIF fund, and also the court special projects fund to move money into the general obligation bond retirement fund for debt service. And then in addition to the transfers, there are several appropriation revisions as noted in the staff memo, the largest being a reappropriation for the grant related to the Springbrook Wetlands Restoration Project. We did authorize this in the fourth quarter of last year, and we're reappropriating it because of the activity occurring in the current calendar year. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I recommend approval. Thank you.
Council?
Move to suspend. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Move for passage. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Ordinance number 19-0-028 has passed. Ordinance number 19-0-029.
An ordinance adopting a policy for recipients of economic development assistance to disclosure liabilities owed to governmental entities, authorizing inspection, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro?
I would defer to the law director on this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Recommended for your enactment tonight is the sort of umbrella policy. What this does, it's the Ohio statutory law, and obviously it would be a fairly inconsistent result for a recipient to receive economic development assistance while owing some other governmental entity, or the state of Ohio for that matter, outstanding liabilities. So the revised code, pursuant to statutory authority, prior to receipt of any such incentives, that recipient is required to disclose. And while that statutory scheme is applicable just to, say, economic incentives granted for tax increment financing or Community Reinvestment Act, this would also apply nonetheless to Mentor economic incentive grants, just to create a broad-based policy. I recommend its enactment simply as an umbrella policy. This way, we don't necessarily have to restate this language or this policy in every single ordinance and every single agreement moving forward. It will be of permanent applicability.
Thank you very much. Council?
Move to suspend. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake? Yes. Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Move for passage. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Ordinance number 19-0-029 has passed. Ordinance number 19-0-0-030.
An ordinance adopting a non-discriminatory hiring policy for recipients of economic development assistance and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro?
Similarly, I defer to the law.
Thank you, Mr. St. Peter. Mr. President, members of council, again, companion legislation to 029. This also mirrors the revised code, although it's a little bit different because the revised code requires communities to affirmatively do something to make sure that recipients of economic development assistance are practicing non-discriminatory hiring policies. Again, contrary to public policy, to allow such recipients to violate that very important law. This would therefore require them to inform us relative to what their manuals require, if they are the subject of any EEOC or Ohio Civil Rights Commission complaints, findings of discrimination, court cases. They are under an obligation to inform the city so that we can take a deeper dive and make sure that they are complying with this important law as a condition of receipt of any economic development assistance, and I therefore would recommend its adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Zeman. Council?
Move to suspend. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Move for passage. Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Ordinance number 19-0-0-030 is passed. Ordinance number 19-0-031.
An ordinance accepting a donation by Wheelbar LLC for a public parking lot to be located on city-owned property known as permanent parcel number 16B040B00026, authorizing the city manager to execute a donation agreement and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an ordinance that is a precursor to very good news. This ordinance is designed to allow CRT Technologies to utilize some of the land within the detention basin behind their facility that the city currently possesses. And the good news part of this is it's a precursor to their expansion. So they're going to be building out in addition to their building, as well as adding some additional parking in this area. Now, this area will accommodate the additional parking. I would ask Mr. Swigger if he has any further comments on this, as he was instrumental in helping put this agreement together.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Zampedro. CRT, or Component Repair Technologies, is an expanding business near the southeast corner of State Route 2 and the 615 interchange. To meet the needs of their growth, they require an additional 1.5 acres of land for expansion of their employee parking area. The only land available and needed for the expansion is currently owned by the city at the southeast corner of the interchange. This 7.260 acre parcel of land was deeded to the city of Mentor by ODOT in 2013. It was previously and it still is currently being utilized as a stormwater management facility. The deed transferring ownership of the property from the state of Ohio to the city of Mentor contains a reversionary clause requiring continued public use of the property. Therefore, the sale of this property to CRT would be very complicated and would require that the reversionary clause be eliminated from the deed. In discussing this with ODOT, it was determined that shared use agreements have been used by ODOT in the past where adjoining property owners desiring sale or use of state lands near highway interchanges may do so without violating the continued public use aspect of the property. The donation agreement before you tonight, Wheelbar LLC, which is CRT Technologies, will construct a parking lot on the 1.504 acres of permitted parcel 16B040260 and donate the parking lot to the city of Mentor. The parking lot will be open to the general public, and public ingress and egress rights to and from Tyler Boulevard will be established by the agreement. Maintenance responsibilities of the parking lot will rest with CRT Technologies. Per the agreement, the parking lot construction shall not result in any net loss in stormwater detention capacity in the basin. Therefore, Wheelbar LLC, or CRT, will be responsible to offset any loss in stormwater detention capacity resulting from the construction of the parking lot by excavating and reshaping the existing basin, thereby reestablishing an equal or greater stormwater detention volume. Thank you.
Counsel?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Blake.
I looked at this with great interest. And this is a wonderful example of how the city of Mentor works with businesses to help meet their needs and to bring about expansion of those businesses. So I applaud you, Dave. This is a great piece to vote on tonight. That's all I have.
Mr. President?
Yes, Ms. Dowling?
Just wanted to kind of piggyback on Sean's comment. This company moved to Mentor about the same time that we moved our company to Mentor. And I recall, I think they were originally like in a multi-tenant building, 10,000 square feet, and they occupied 5,000 square feet. And you want to talk about a true success story. I don't know how many square feet they occupy now, and to hear they're putting another expansion on it, it really is wonderful, and it's good to see the city work with them.
Well, the parking's set for about plus or minus 197 vehicles, so I think it's quite a good expansion.
That's big.
It's
Any other-
wonderful.
Any other comments or questions?
Long time coming. This administration's been working on this for years, so it took a little while to line everything up with the state, but, we're getting it done, and that's important. Move to suspend.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Excuse me, Mr. Krieger.
Yes.
Mr. Landig.
Yes.
Mr. Marne.
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Donovan.
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling.
Yes.
Passage.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger.
Yes.
Mr. Landig.
Yes.
Mr. Marne.
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Donovan.
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling.
Yes.
Ordinance number 19-0-031 is passed. Ordinance number 19-0-032.
An ordinance declaring the improvement to certain real property within the city of Mentor, Ohio, known as permanent parcel number 16A003000340, to be a public purpose and exempt from real property taxes, identifying certain public infrastructure improvements that, once made, will directly benefit the parcel, requiring the owner to make service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a public improvement tax increment equivalent fund, approving and authorizing the execution and delivery of a TIF agreement with Mall at Great Lakes LLC, together with related authorizations, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I hope this one's viewed with equally good fervor on the part of council. We have been working on this project for a number of years with the Great Lakes Mall, Washington Prime. They are in a position to reinvest and redevelop the old Office Max site and bring in a Hobby Lobby, which we feel very confident is a retail destination, will enhance the retail business at the mall. This TIF is a little bit different than our typical TIF projects that we have done. This TIF is going to assist the developer in that redevelopment and in that reinvestment. I do want to thank the law director, Joe Zeman, who spent a great deal of time on this, because this was not our normal process. This was something new for us, but we're adding to our economic development toolbox here. And thank you, Mr. Zeman. Worked very diligently with the attorneys for the mall. And what this will accomplish is the public purpose of that reinvestment and redevelopment in assisting them to demolish the structure that had been out there, demolish the old asphalt parking lot that is there, bring in the sewer and sanitary storm sewer system that has to obviously be in place, amongst other things. The projection in this legislation does allow for a maximum recapture by the developer of up to $500,000 for those costs of those projects over the term of the TIF. The risk to the city is non-existent. This is still is a non-school TIF, which council is familiar with. The schools will be made whole versus the service payments that will be redirected from the real estate taxes. So the schools are made whole. The developer can only recoup what is actually expended in those service payments up to a maximum of $500,000. In the event, and we believe that the event is likely that it exceeds that, those monies would be redirected to our general TIF funds, by which we use for typically road infrastructure and additions to the streetscape. So I would ask Ms. Conrad, who is here tonight for the first time in place of Mr. Malachek, if she would like to add to anything I've said.
Thank you, Mr. Zampedro, members of council. You look at the malls around and they're failing. I think that bringing this destination retailer to Mentor around the Great Lakes Mall region is going to help build our economic development. It's going to build the mall. Our mall is not failing, and this is the reason why, because we are redeveloping and we are bringing new companies and destination retailers to the area. And everything else echoing that Mr. Zampedro said as well. We think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
I would simply add to, again, thank you to council, the Economic Development Committee, and council in general. Again, this, as you know, we've, I think, formed a very good partnership with Washington Prime, Great Lakes Mall, in terms of making sure that they remain a very successful and vibrant retail community within Mentor. And I believe Kate is here from the mall. Would you like to say anything?
Kate, you have to go to the podium. Sorry. You have to state your name and address.
Kate Miller, Marketing Director, Great Lakes Mall. Should I give the mall address, or?
That's fine.
Okay, 7850 Menor Avenue, Menor 44060. I just want to say thank you for your support throughout the years. Matt does apologize that he wasn't able to make it tonight, Matt Jerkowitz. He's been working closely with city folks on this project. He did have a prior engagement that preceded this, but just wanted to say how excited we are that Hobby Lobby is coming to Mentor. It's right now, folks are driving past us to go down to Macedonia, so I think it'll just help us to further recapture those shoppers and keep them here in Lake County.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any other?
President?
Mr.
Yeah, I just,
Donovan?
a couple pages in it, I noticed, Tony, it says Heisley Road, Menor Avenue, Center Street, Reynolds Road, and Johnny Cake Ridge. Are those all included in the same scenario that the mall is?
Yeah, those, I believe, are sort of our typical laundry list for general road improvements. As council is very much aware, one of the largest public infrastructure concerns we have in the city is the movement of traffic, and one end of the city affects the other end of the city very easily. So
that's all tied in together with?
That is tied in, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Council?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Move for passage.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Ordinance number 19-0-032 is passed. Ordinance number 19-0-033.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a labor agreement on behalf of the city of Mentor with the Mentor Part-Time Firefighters Association and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro.
Thank you, Mr. Krieger, President Krieger. Now, this is one that I usually get to bring to council. I apologize that this one has taken a little longer than we typically allow. We're actually into our second year of this contract term with the part-time firefighters who, quite frankly, do an excellent job for us. Our discussions were long and numerous this time around, primarily centering on issues regarding their pay structure. By and large, you won't find anything too much different here. 2.5, which mirrors the other collective bargaining units, and then because they're in the off-year cycle, a reopener in their third year. That has been our typical pattern for this unit over the years. The only other insignificant adjustment, I think, was a 5-cent adjustment to their uniform allowance, and they accrue that by an hourly stipend up to a maximum of, Chief, help me, is it $15.50?
1550, yes, sir.
Which is the same as the uniform.
Yes.
Yeah, because these guys they work different hours annually than our regular full-time firefighters. So the incentive there is the more hours they work, the more uniform allowance they get. Obviously, they need it. If they're working more hours, they're going to go through their uniforms a little bit quicker. The nickel only, we did not adjust the cap. The nickel only means that they will, the 75 cents as opposed to 70 means they'll get to the cap just a little bit sooner. The big change in this one, though, is our incentive pay that we did, that was, I think, the culmination of the long negotiation to try to make some, I think, equity adjustments in this contract. And essentially, it's, we have a number of part-time firefighters who have in excess of 20 years of experience with us and who do put in, as part-time firefighters, almost as many, if not as many hours as our full-timers. And the pay there is adjusted for a year-end bonus of up to $1,050, which is roughly a 50-cent an hour adjustment for 2,100 hours worked in the year. So I would ask the chief to maybe expound on that just a little bit so that council understands. It was very important to this unit to get that recognition, and we feel it is deserved. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Zampedro. Members of council, as you know, and as Mr. Zampedro stated, we have a dedicated group of part-timers, and 8 of them have more than 20 years on the department, some as much as 30 years, and that brings a lot of experience. And that was our time at the table. I want to thank Mr. Zampedro for taking the lead at the table. But we couldn't get over addressing the experienced firefighters because they've been stuck at that paid grade for a long time. They do bring a lot of experience. But the big stumbling point was their experience could be taken to other departments, and other departments were paying quite a bit more. So we had to make that adjustment. And what we settled with was a retention experience incentive. And the benefit to the city for that is that it requires them to work a number of hours to reach that point where they're eligible for the incentive. And they bring that experience while they're doing that. And it brings them in line with wages in other cities. It puts them just below Wickliffe. And then if you go to Cuyahoga and Geauga County, they're a little bit below. But we got to a point where we feel it's a fair wage. We feel that again, they need to work the hours to be eligible for the wage, and it's a win-win for both. So I ask you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Council, move to suspend.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Move for passage.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Ordinance number 19-0-033 is passed. Resolution number 19-R-105.
A a resolution declaring it necessary to improve the streets hereinafter mentioned within the termini designated by supplying such streets with electric lighting and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro.
Thank you, sir. This is our annual process for assessing for street lighting, and I'd ask the Finance Director, Mr. Malinowski, to comment further.
Thank you, Mr. Zampedro. Members of council, this is the first step in the street lighting citywide process. It approves a resolution declaring it necessary to eventually assess at a rate determined by the amount of expenditures that are incurred citywide. The rate is exactly $1.20 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. That is the identical rate for the previous 2 years. Another item to point out in the staff memo is we estimate projected expenditures to be a little over $1.5 million for the year 2020 that we're looking at collecting for, and the estimated collections would be $1,478,000 roughly. I would recommend approval of this resolution. Thank you.
Council?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Mr. Malinowski, Mr. Zampedro, Mr. Malinowski, has there been any further discussion on updating to the year 2019 with how they assess this and certified mail and all that other stuff that goes along?
In regards to that topic, I've only had a brief conversation with the clerk of council, and I believe the law director and the clerk have looked into this topic. I don't, it probably makes sense for one of those two to address that question.
Mr. Zeman? Oh, you're looking at each other. Let me back up. No.
I'll take that as a no, that's fine. That's fine. All right, move to suspend.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes,
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
move for passage.
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
No,
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Ordinance number, excuse me, resolution number 19-R-105 has passed. We have on second reading, ordinance number 19-O-022.
An ordinance approving the final subdivision plat of 21 residential lots in the Becker's Landing subdivision and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zampedro.
Mr. President, to my knowledge, since the last meeting, the administration has not been in contact with anybody, with the developer or his agents, although I don't know if Mr. Zeman would like to comment further.
Yes, Mr. President, members of council, we have had communications with council for the developer. I know he's present here today. Those communications had not reached a final resolution, and so that's the current status of it, so nodding.
So no final resolution. Mr. Walter, did you want to speak?
We're still in discussions. Again, I know last meeting we were here, there was some discussion of my client being responsible for putting Ts in for sanitary sewage. I don't know of any precedent that would allow that. I guess I would ask Mr. Zeman to provide some that would allow that condition if it doesn't benefit our property at all. But Mr. Zeman and I have been contacted. You know, our position still, as of tonight, is we do not want to, nor do I think there's authority. And I think at the last meeting, there was a position stated that the city has never required this of any of the developments. There were some discussions of a short left turn only lane and sidewalks, which the question came up about sidewalks. The plat review actually shows they're putting sidewalks in. So at this time, Mr. Zeman adequately expresses where we're at, but as I stand here right now, my clients are not willing to put any money this time.
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Swiger. Mr. Walter said we've never done this before in the city. I believe we have, over off of Maple Street in that subdivision.
That is
Would you
correct.
please explain that?
Yes, there was a roadway Baker that was going to be an access point for the new subdivision on Maple Street. So the street was narrow, As he mentioned, sidewalks weren't on, I don't recall sidewalks being there, so we had sidewalks included. And the street was reconstructed to a more adequate current roadway standard, and the road was widened. But it was a short section of roadway. I don't recall the exact distance.
Okay, but it has been done in the city of Mentor before.
It has.
Okay, thank you. Council.
President, I would just say that I remember our last meeting that the administration and the developer were going to get together and come back with a bunch of answers about the road, about the sanitary, about the cul-de-sac. I moved to put it on third reading.
Second.
Second reading, Rhett?
Second.
What's it?
I think I missed them. Third reading would be.
Okay, so it's going to third reading.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's a third reading.
Did you second?
Yeah, second.
Thank you.
Julie, call the roll?
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 19-0-022 has been put to third reading. Third reading, we have none. Now we move to manager's report. Mr. Zampedro,
Thank you.
you are the manager.
This is a switch.
Enjoy it,
think
enjoy it while you can.
The last time I got to do this, I made fun of Eddie Walsh, so that'll tell you how long
That's a
ago.
while
that-
ago.
And that was the last time I got to do this. So we'll begin with our pavement cuts. We do have an assortment of them for you tonight, and I would ask the city engineer to go through them.
Thank you, Mr. Zampedro. We do have 4 pavement open cut requests on the agenda tonight. The first is from Chadwick Homes. Chadwick Homes is requesting permission to open cut the pavement at 7068 Culver Boulevard. Culver Boulevard was last paved in 2012, and its most current PCR is pavement condition rating is 64.8. The open cut is required in order to provide sanitary service for a new house at this address. They will need to tie into the sanitary main under the roadway, and work cannot be completed without open cutting the pavement, and approval is recommended. Thank you.
Okay, council.
Move to approve?
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Okay, the 3 additional open cut requests are from Aqua, Ohio. The first request is to repair a broken water main at 6171 Seminole Trail. The second request is for a new water services installation at a new home at 6224 Seminole Trail. And the last request by Aqua is to repair a broken water valve at the intersection of Tall Oaks Drive and Lakeshore Boulevard. Thank you.
Council? No. Yes, Mr. Landig?
Yes, are we taking these as a group?
Can we take them as a group?
You can?
Yeah, we can.
Well, my comment would be, we have 2 roads that have a PCR of 100, and to me, it's like buying a new car. You get a 5-year, 100,000-mile warranty when you buy a new car. We don't, respectively, we take bonds, but when you get a new car, I think there should be a warranty. Or when you have a new road and you're cutting it, it can't be avoided, but it should be warranted, just like if you had that new car and have a problem, you get a warranty, and it's taken care of and guaranteed for a certain amount of time. So if we take them as a group, I'll still be voting no.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Julie already has them written out individually.
Okay.
So we could take them individually.
Okay, we take them individually. All right, let's address Aqua, Ohio broken water main repair at 6171 Seminole Trail. Council?
Move to approve?
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
No.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Ohio water service installation at 6224 Seminole Trail. Council?
Move to approve?
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
No.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Agua, Ohio broken water valve replacement at Tall Oaks Drive and Lakeshore Boulevard.
Move to approve?
Second.
Julie, call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Okay, all cuts have been approved. Clerk's correspondence.
Is he done?
Oh, I'm sorry, you done with your manager's report?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not.
I'm sorry.
He's rolling.
Gonna let you off the hook that easy. I do want to, it will be somewhat brief, but to begin with, on a somber note, National Police Week is Sunday, May 12th through Saturday, May 18th. A contingent from the Mentor Police Department is traveling to Washington DC next week for the Candlelight Vigil and Memorial Service. This year, Patrolman Matthew Mazzani's name will be unveiled on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, which is located at the National Mall in Washington. And similarly, locally, on Friday, May 17th, members of the police department will also take part in the Greater Cleveland Peace Officer Memorial Parade and Memorial Commemoration, where Patrolman Mazzani's name will also be unveiled on the Greater Cleveland Peace Officers Memorial Wall. And lastly, in that regard, Friday at 3 p.m. here, where the patrol car used to be in the front, we will be dedicating a tree to our own patrolman, Matthew Mazzani. And as part of this vigil, we are endeavoring to bathe the city hall building in blue lights, as well as have the amphitheater reflect a blue tone throughout this period. So that was very important, I think, for this council and for our community to know that is ongoing this month. Public Works indicates that the Lake County Solid Waste Management District is conducting a special drop-off program for televisions and CRT monitors this Saturday, May 11th, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Lake County Fairgrounds. There may be a small fee associated, so please check their website. Lastly, I would just recognize two new businesses that have come into the city or have opened the doors. Bada Boom Pizza at 8020 Broadmoor Drive, and the Classic Mazda dealership at 6951 Center Street.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That's it?
That is it.
Last moment of glory. Okay.
That's
All right, now, clerk's correspondence.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Okay, we're in possession of commission and committee reports, the meeting minutes for the Board of Zoning Appeals, March 12th, 2019. Municipal Planning Commission, March 28th, 2019. Charter Review Committee, April 4th of 2019. Charter Review Subcommittee, April 8th, 2019. And the Tree Commission for April 10th, 2019. Old business, none. New business.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Mr. Lanning brings up a good point about warranties and open cuts and things of that nature. I mean, years ago, it was 1 year, and then I think we increased it to 2 years, almost always.
We require a 1-year performance and maintenance bond for open cuts that are performed by individual entities, private contractors. And typically, we bond $5,000 per lane affected. So one of the things we haven't done is require utilities to provide the bonding, and that's typically been because they've been they're always available, they're present, and we basically require them to repair any open cut if needed, as needed, whenever needed. But I could say in probably 20 years, we probably had one failure in an open cut based on the subgrade compaction. We require low-strength mortar backfill, and since we made that change to make that requirement, I'm only aware of one failure, and that was somebody that was coming up with their own mix, not a standard ODOT mix. But we've been pretty fortunate with our open cuts as far as failures. Whenever you cut a pavement, there's always an element of maintenance that's required as far as crack sealing the edges that may need to be done over the years. But we've had a pretty good track record. The policy has been pretty good. The utility companies have been pretty responsible in responding to any concern related to an open cut, but very few failures we've had.
I agree with Mr. Landig in what he's saying, because I remember years ago, it was anodes, I believe, right after the state repaved part of 84, like in front of Hunter's Woods. So there it was a year later, and then we had to go in and cut up the road after these anodes could have been replaced while we were repaving the road. I mean, so I think that's what Mr. Landick's trying to say. Mr. Landick, sound about right? So that way we're making sure we're doing what we need to do when these roads are, before these roads are being resurfaced.
There's periods when you can't control when an open cut occurs, like a water line break, it's an emergency. But if they warranty when they have to go in for a 5-year period, it sounds like it wouldn't be a problem for them, because we have often we're meeting that warranty type period. And it's the sealing of the asphalt roads that I really see as a point of water entry into our roads and bases, and that deteriorates our roads faster. So when we have a PCR of 100, I'd like to do everything we can to warranty that new road.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I guess, Dave, you're saying basically that the contractor who does the work, and if there was a problem, you haven't really had a hard time getting them back to repair that again? Because they're bonded too, correct? I mean, they're bonded, most of them are bonded.
They're bonded, but we have a specific performance and maintenance bond we use for open cuts in the right-of-way. As I mentioned, if the work isn't being performed by a utility, we do require the bonding. So it's just a policy that was developed probably 20 years ago, maybe longer, but it's always been in place since I've been with the city. We could consider requiring bonding from utility companies. I think possibly the last time we had a discussion, you will get pushback from companies. I would say First Energy would be one that wouldn't welcome bonding. They would have to speak for themselves, but I think my recollection was they were against that. I think that would be probably the feedback we would get. But we can have that discussion now. The policy's been in place for quite some time. We have discussed increasing the length of the bonding period, and I think bonds these days are more common to be longer than 1 year. So I think definitely that could be considered as part of our bonding moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Last comment is, if we said no to First Energy and voted down their open cut, I think they'd look at it differently.
Say no to the streetlights.
No comment on Dave.
Mr. Zeman?
New business?
What's that?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes, Mr. President, my understanding is council desires to move into an executive session tonight, specifically to talk about employment matters. The motion would be made pursuant to Revised Code Section 121.22G1, and specifically that the council can consider compensation for various city employees and officials. Pursuant to that section, the motion need not state the names of the individuals that you'll be discussing as pertaining to compensation, and compensation may be the only thing, unless that motion adds to it, that you may discuss relative to employees and officials.
What about pending legal? Toll booths, one-lane roads, anything like that? We touched.
You can add it in the motion, right?
If you want to.
If you want to add that in the motion.
Yes, I'd like to add pending legal into the motion.
Okay.
Well, all right, so the motion would be made to move into executive session. I'm assuming that's
Yeah, everything you said plus pending
specifically the case, specifically the case of City of Painesville versus City of Mentor. It is pending. We do have motions scheduled on May 31st if council desires to consult with me relative to that case.
Okay.
Second.
Julie?
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Okay, Julie?
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Move to adjourn.
Oh, wait, no, you've got to say.
Executive session was limited to discussion of employee and of public official compensation, and executive session was determined not to hold the executive session relative to pending litigation.
Okay, now.
Okay, let me finish that there's no new business and there's no persons before council.
Move to adjourn.
Second.